We all know what Yu-Gi-Oh! Is about now. It's an extremely evolved and popular card game with many different ways to play, strategies, archetypes and decks. But what if I told you it was never supposed to be a card game? Yu-Gi-Oh! As we know it has strayed quite far away from the original concept through wanting to target a younger audience. A lot of the more mature themes have been censored heavily, and believe me, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is notorious for censorship. Now, something that's always been core to Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the idea of a shadow game. The creator of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Kazuki Takahashi, was a big fan of games in general and liked the idea of there being something at stake, and he wanted to have his characters engage in these games, leading to some dire consequences. This is evident in some of his earliest work, and from the very first chapter of Yu-Gi-Oh! He was creating an element of darkness and mystery, especially surrounding the character Yami Yugi. These dark elements come from the initial intention of creating a horror manga. It was initially supposed to be called Magic and Wizards, and some of those elements are still noticeable in today's game, especially in the card artwork. So when exactly did it all change? There was one game within the many that were demonstrated in the manga that seemed to become very popular, and that game was Duel Monsters. Now, the official card game now is called Yu-Gi-Oh!, but the first iteration of it was in fact called Duel Monsters. Now, with the success of Duel Monsters, the official card game got released, and shortly after that, an anime. But with the massive success of the franchise, there was also a shift. To open up the market to a younger audience, they had to censor some of the more mature themes, which did massively reduce the horror aspect of Yu-Gi-Oh! Don't get me wrong, there are still some great moments from the anime that utilize horror to its advantage. However, it became a much less prevalent theme, especially among the Yu-Gi-Oh! Spin-offs, as these seem to become more and more diluted from the original idea. For example, Bakura has some absolutely chilling moments, being downright sadistic at times, like when he defeats Bones and tells him that he can now wander the afterlife for eternity. But this isn't quite the same level of horror as the source material. Bakura has literally ripped the Millennium Eye out of Pegasus' head, and then proceeds to lick it. A horrific and kind of disgusting visual, but of course this wasn't shown in the anime. And unfortunately, there are some disastrous moments of censorship in the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, and a prime example of this is the finger guns. This completely removes the tension from any of the scenes it's used in, and can honestly be confusing because you don't actually understand what's going on, given that it just looks like characters are pointing at each other. On top of this, some censorships don't even make sense. Okay, fair enough, they don't want kids to see guns, but censoring Destiny Board, I feel like had no impact whatsoever. Instead of showing the word death, they'd rather have it spell out final. I feel like this is such a minimal change and was completely unnecessary. To be fair, in the spin-offs, there's not that much censorship, as they were all originally written with children in mind as the target audience. The downside of this is I feel there's a missing piece of the original vision, even down to some of the simple things like how many monsters actually look like monsters. And this problem also affects the villains, because I don't feel they're nearly as threatening as they could or should be. I feel like there needs to be a threat on both a human and monster level, because almost every villain in Yu-Gi-Oh! Turns into some sort of monster. Every major villain for sure, but at least Bakura was threatening as a human as well, and I think that's a key factor for a villain. Take the instance of Bakura licking the Millennium Eye. That's off-putting, it's twisted, and partially due to censorship and marketing to a younger audience, we don't see that anymore, and we've lost a little bit of the magic that spawned from the dark origins of Yu-Gi-Oh!